Guys, what's going on, and welcome back to another video on Conqueror's Blade, as today we are going to be diving into the Season 8 unit, the Modaos. But Modaos, that's what we're all here for. Let's dive into the barracks and have a little bit of a look at them. Obviously we have to skivvy all the way along because we're still on tier 3 on units at the time of recording this. But of course it doesn't apply in ranked battles. And in ranked battles, I'm really finding these Modao are shining. And I think I actually did a similar video to this a couple of seasons ago when I last started playing ranked properly, and found that normally in a siege, I think most people find Modao have kind of gone fairly off meta now, and they're kind of not really that much of an effective unit. But when you start to go back into ranked, cavalry really starts to dominate. Combined with that, you get a lot more team play. You get shields, you get support, and suddenly the Modao actually start to become a much more viable unit, particularly when you go and brace them in a nice block and someone tries to charge their cataphracts right through and it just wipes the whole unit. They are fantastic. So they actually are a really viable unit in ranked, and I think it's a really useful addition to the team because you're not only providing damage against enemy infantry, but you're providing that anti-cavalry support. And that's kind of really important in these sort of ranked battles. So in terms of veterancy line, I've gone down the bottom, kind of make them a little bit more tanky, and sort of increase all their defences, which we kind of see. Get their piercing defence up to 900. Not a 24 stack unit with 14,000 people. And remember, when they're bracing, they actually take less damage, 33% less from cavalry, but also a little bit less from infantry. Then these stats combined with this health does make them a pretty tanky unit. On top of that, they actually get pretty reasonable base damage stats. The actual base damage is good but not amazing, but it's actually their piercing and slashing AP, which is actually pretty reasonable, and that's what means they can actually apply a decent amount of damage and actually do a bit of work. So as we briefly touched on, they've got 3 abilities. A brace, which is what they call Modao defense. The unit basically sort of adopts a bit of a wide stance, plants their, I don't even know what they are, speary type sword thing, and they don't move. If people come into their range, they'll stab infantry. If cavalry come into their range, they'll block the cavalry. They'll basically cause and interrupt and do an immense amount of damage and basically kill the cavalry very effectively. They also have a Modao March, which is basically an instantaneous stab. Anything that's in a couple of meters of the unit, they'll stab forwards, lunge their spears into any enemies. Does a good chunk of damage. Really, really short cooldown, which means you're just regularly hitting this ability over and over and over. And then finally, we have Carnage, which is where they basically advance forwards in a designated direction, almost like a charge ability. As soon as they reach an enemy, they do an overhead slash, which does a boatload of damage. Really effective if you can get it to sort of activate on a tight cluster of enemy units, then you can really almost one stack wipe an enemy unit. So they've got a really nice selection of abilities to make use of. But anyway, I think we've probably waffled on about them. I suppose we'll have a quick look at doctrines. Got the Modao doctrine, which basically makes them slightly more effective against cavalry. Bit of extra piercing damage, bit of extra piercing defense to make them a bit more tanky, and then extra damage to units, and of course the siege fighter doctrine. These two always work really nicely in combination just to boost up the unit's overall damage output. But anyway, let's hop into a few battles with them. So we kick things off on a ranked battle on the stone steps. Probably the best of all the ranked field battle maps, at least for me. I kind of don't mind this one, and I normally don't like field battles. Anyway, we get put straight on our arse by that longsword, but I'm using the Modao, brought them to the B point. They're a really slow unit, so this kind of is the best area for them. Immediately get challenged by some Varangians who push in, go straight for the Carnage. They do a chunk of damages to their initial ability, but their initial ability fires while we're in a fairly dispersed formation and they don't get that many kills, and we can then Carnage the clump of them. These crossbows had pushed at the back. They were slowed by the dogs, they couldn't get away. Just be aggressive. 16 kills, both on tier 5 units, well worth it, really nice start to the game. In that situation where you've got ranged units like that, where you have the opportunity to go to them and they can't escape, the longer you sort of dither, the more damage you're going to take. Just be aggressive. Took some losses, hurt the unit a bit, but not a bad start to the game. Anyway, since we did that, time to pull back, get over to the supply point, get ourselves a little bit healed up. And really, with a unit like this, they are very slow. So I tend to always really use them on the B point on this map. you can kind of, obviously get to A and C, but it takes you such a bloody long time to get anywhere. It's really just not worth it. Easier just to stick on the B point. And generally on this map, I find that if you hold the B point for the entire game, generally you end up winning because it allows some of your other teammates who've got cav and faster units to really sort of dominate A and C. And so long as the enemy team can't really get B back, you don't tend to do too badly. Anyway, we come back. Got a few monastics here, which unfortunately I can't really get stuck into with my Modao, unfortunately. Very nearly get flattened by a pike charge, but we just managed to avoid it. Use some of our hero abilities on the enemy glaive, and then our unit eventually turns up. And this is kind of one of the problem with Modao. They're pretty slow. As we say, they kind of got here after everything had already happened. I wildly just stabbed into a bit of cloth. Not really doing anything useful. Anyway, with that happening, I'm trying to decide what do I want to do next. Okay, we've got a bit of stuff going on at A and C, but as I kind of said, I kind of like to leave this unit here, really. Having a bit of a look around, trying to see if there's anything interesting going on. Anything I can kind of intercept. Got a little bit of stuff looking like it's sort of going down round to the C point. And I could sort of think about moving to try and intercept that. But then we actually get a little bit of stuff coming down the steps here. And to kind of highlight, this is why I don't like using units with double tap C. I almost was confused. I don't know why I wasn't more aggressive here. I definitely should have been. It was definitely a misplay. Could have cut much more of this unit of Imp Pike. I just somehow thought it almost seemed like a trap. Because it was this straggling line of Imp Pike just slowly walking in front of me. So I could have definitely have got more of them there. But yeah, that's why I don't like using moving units by double tap C, because they kind of stretch into this long, thin line, and it just leaves the unit really vulnerable. Much prefer using them with X. Get these Fortebraccios that think about coming down. I'm kind of interested in them. I'm happy to target them, but don't really want to be doing it on a thin and narrow platform, because it's really fighting into the Fortebraccio's strengths. But anyway, we get a few Hussars coming down, so I lock them down with my hero, call the unit over. We get engaged a little bit, grab one or two of them, but then we get some monastics coming from behind. I actually braced too early here, should have pushed forwards a bit further into them, could have done more damage there. We get stuck in, use our tour ability, which is on a really short cooldown, and we can deal with enemy cav, even in a loose formation, so long as we're not being charged by them, really quite effectively. We do lose a few of the unit as some of them drag to the other side of this sort of structure, which was kind of a shame, and I was getting into a situation where I was starting to get surrounded on all flanks. So pull back, brace up the unit, and the unit turns to deal with whatever it's being attacked by. So it doesn't really matter if you brace the wrong way as such, particularly when you're surrounded by cav. But if these 40s come around the corner, you've got to move, right? If you don't get in and close the range to these 40s, they are going to be able to damage me, and I'm not going to be able to damage them. Push the Modaos in, straight on with the Carnage, straight on with that 3 ability, get nice in and close, get the damage, pretty much wipe out the 40s almost instantly. We do take a chunk of damage in the process. We then get some stalwarts pushing in, get my hero in from behind, and then just use the Modao in a loose formation to continue to attack them. I unfortunately managed to get knocked down basically in the blob before I get dual bladed, and that ultimately meets my death. Not kind of proving here that Modao are a unit that just get vast numbers of kills super quickly, or they're a super dominant unit in that way, but they're a really steadfast unit that lives a long time and just has a lot of versatility. Of course, we all know they can kill cav really dominantly. I haven't really included many anti-cav clips in this, because we know they can do that. If you charge some cav into them, it's just going to die. They brace, it dies. But they can also be pretty tanky and pretty survivable as kind of like a point-holding unit as well. And that's why I think they're such an effective unit in ranked battles. They can just hold. They're just a versatile unit that can do a bit of everything, and they're almost never a bad pick. You never really have any truly shocking games with them. And in the absolute worst case, if you basically can get no infantry kills with them, you can at least anti-cav. At the end of the day, that is always a useful team support class to have. Probably the most useful support class you can have, because particularly in ranked, cavalry is very heavily used, by more elite players. They tend to be more cavalry focused. And that being able to provide anti-cav is super useful. Even if cav doesn't directly engage you, holding in a unit of friendly units, so basically stopping enemy cav from being able to rear charge, being able to get round, being able to push through the front of a formation is a useful ability. And that's why Modao, I think, are such a useful unit to take into ranked battles. Anyway, I mean, we've just been going through a little bit of a mini clip on Reggie. It's a little bit of a sort of a fight right down to the end, just trying to hold these sort of A and B point. Unit sort of acquitting itself fairly admirably, I think. Fight's okay, getting stuck in on some of those shield maidens we saw at the start. As long as you can avoid that initial hit, then they can actually use their Carnage. And their Carnage, their 3 ability, actually takes out quite a lot of enemies. It's really quite a damaging ability, certainly not to be underestimated. And their 2, which is a sort of short lunge, just comes off cooldown so quickly that you can pretty regularly cycle it. And if all else fails, just brace them. They get a sort of an 8% or so infantry damage reduction, and always handy if cavalry come into them. Oh, grabbed ourselves a little hero kill, just as we push into the mass outside the gate. But anyway, that's kind of my experience with Modao's. A kind of an enjoyable unit. Really, I think, an essential unit for ranked battles. Some of the team at least need to be taking them. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I shall see you guys all on the next video.